And welcome back, everybody. Today we are jumping into a whole new series of BigD podcasts today, and hopefully, along to the future, we're going to be doing some podcasts around DCS. You've seen us cover this game a lot. It's sort of a little bit of a fun downtime sort of game that we get into. Nothing that BigD actually backs officially, but something that's a lot of fun nonetheless. Now, join with me for these podcasts, pretty much for everyone, I think, from here, because he's the brains of this entire operation, is Schamgz. Now, Schamgz does a ton of the footage you actually see on DCS, unless it's in an A10. If it's an A10, then it's me. If it's anything else, it's definitely Schamgz. He's the brains of this operation. So all of the lingo, all the things that I don't know, he's going to fill in all of the gaps. So welcome to the very first podcast you're going to be in, Schamgz.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
That's what we're here for. It's what we're here for. Now, let's get kicking straight into this. We want to make sure that these podcasts are something that you can listen to and not get too tiresome of. So we're going to make them short and punchy for you. We're going to get into started. So, Schmags, what is DCS?
Yeah, DCS, Digital Combat Simulator. It's a military flight sim. So think of Microsoft Flight Simulator, except that you can shoot everyone else down
But with guns, it's
with
747s, but
guns.
with
Yeah,
guns.
guns,
Yeah.
missiles. Yeah. So that's how I usually describe it to people if they've never heard of it. Because a lot of people have heard of Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's like the OG of flight sims. But with DCS, yeah, it just takes it to the next level in terms of internal systems, and in terms of radars, missile guidance, air to ground stuff. Yeah,
So it's a lot like so if you're into flight sims, so the real proper flight sims, then this is definitely one of the games you need to, if you wanted to sort of upgrade from the civilian side of things to the military side of things, then DCS is that next way to be able to jump into, or even if you're wanting to sort of upgrade from something like War Thunder, because War Thunder's a lot of things that DCS always gets compared to, but when you actually really start getting into DCS, you sort of can't compare them because it's definitely way more
yeah.
milsim than War Thunder's a lot more arcadey. You can play
Well,
War Thunder on a mouse and keyboard. You
yeah.
can't play
Well,
mouse and keyboard for DCS, that's for sure.
yeah. You can. There are a few people that can. It's a mad skill, but I think I compare War Thunder to what Squad is for FPS. That Milcade, where it has simulational aspects to it, but it's also mixed with an arcadey feel because it's quick, the action's really intense, and it brings a lot of people together. Whereas with DCS, you've got the flights. There's more detail in the flights of setting the aircraft up, weapon selection, and stuff like that. But also from taking off, setting up the aircraft, literally in air, going to the target area. Sometimes, and as you know, we've been flying to our target area for like 30, 40 minutes, doing our dropping of munitions and coming back. So that's the aspect where the simulation comes in compared to War Thunder.
Yeah, flying that 30, 40 minutes and then realizing that you've got to actually load your airframe or you get shot down by a by a manpad straight away is definitely one of the more frustrating things. Especially in an A10 when you're at crawling speed going like 300 knots in comparison to your breaking the sound barrier. Things take a lot longer in
I
the
think,
in the
yeah,
helicopters and the A10s.
like at the end of the day, this is still a game, right? I mean, it does its best to represent real world as much as it can in a game. So you I don't take anything in DCS as close as it can be real as verbatim, if you know what I mean. I mean, it's really cool when you see military clips on YouTube of A10s doing their thing, they're practicing, and they're setting that 30 mil cannon on targets and stuff. But what you don't see is how slow that aircraft is when there's nothing on it, plus when it's loaded, but then getting into an actual target zone where there's a lot of time observing the target zone, what's there, what can potentially fire back at me, what's friendly, what's foe as well.
Yeah,
So that's
because
yeah.
I've definitely shot down one or two friendlies in my days accidentally and on purpose. That's for sure. So,
But it's so easy to do in this game
oh, it
without
is. It is.
communication and understanding of what the enemy tanks looks like versus your own friendly tanks.
Yeah, you don't want to be an M1A1 Abram versus a T90. You got to make sure you know the difference, and
Oh
that
yeah,
sort of
100%.
leads into that's what DCS is. So how does somebody get into it? We touched on it before, where mouse and keyboard, unless you are an absolute skilled individual, which is few and far between, you need to set yourself up with the correct HOTAS to be able to actually play this game. Much like your flight sims, you can't sort of go in half-ass. But how do you actually properly get into it? So obviously, a HOTAS is the first thing, but not just any HOTAS. For example, we've seen
Uh,
those really cheap. I forget what the model number is. Those really cheap
yep,
Logitech ones, which is
yep,
just the actual stick. It's not the throttle control. So, what's the
yep,
minimum that you sort of recommend to be able to try and get into that? Because as well as
yep.
the stick and the throttle, you need a fairly decent rig to play this properly. Not something that's over the top, but you can't be coming into DCS with like 8 gig of RAM and a really old school bloody like Ryzen 5 2600, for example.
Will my Pentium run it?
Yeah, exactly. Like we don't need a dual core inbuilt graphics CPU, that's for
um,
sure. So
yeah,
let's touch on the
cool.
HOTAS first. What
Yeah, all right,
HOTAS
I'll
do you
hit on
need
the
to run?
HOTAS. Okay, so with DCS, we got to understand that there's two kind of flight models of aircraft. You have low fidelity and high fidelity. So what that means, that low fidelity means is that it's a basic function, cockpit function, where everything is pretty much on keybind and the cockpit internally isn't clickable. So all the buttons isn't clickable. So when you move your mouse around, it won't activate anything. High fidelity, that's when, if you see the videos that you put up in the A10 or from me flying, every single button in the cockpit is clickable, and you have to set up your internal systems and all that jazz. So I recommend everyone that want to get into it is to go the low fidelity route, just to get the basics and the feel for the game for the first, say, 6 months before they jump up to a high fidelity model. Mainly because the price is a lot cheaper. So you can pick up, if Steam's having a sale or ED themselves are having a sale, you can pick up, say, the F-15C, which is the first aircraft I started playing with. I picked that up for $10. And at the time, I was actually using a Thrustmaster uh, T-Flight HOTAS X, where it's like the stick and the throttle joined together,
Yeah, I've
which I can
seen
have.
that one.
You've seen one there. So all the basic functions of firing, selecting your modes was pretty much, I could pretty much bind the most important things onto that stick. But everything else in terms of slewing the radar around, changing those parameters. I think chaff and flare was on the keyboard as well. I had them binded up. So that's where I first started, and quite easily with the A10A as well. If you want that ground pounding action, you can just basically start with that. So that's a really good way to start from there. And then once you get the core basics of navigation, takeoff, landing, weapons layout, um, going on to target areas, releasing your weapons, or air to air kind of stuff. Once you get that kind of thing, then you get a feel of what you want to bump up to. So like you might bump up to, say, the Logitech X52 HOTAS. So HOTAS means hands on stick and throttle. So meaning that your hands are separate on your throttle and on your stick, and you got all your functions on there. I went from that to the X56 mainly because it has way more buttons on the stick and also on the throttle, so
Oh,
I can
that's
get as
that's the one that you got me into. We both run the X56 Rhinos from Logitech, and that's a
yeah,
sweet spot. Bit pricier, but beautiful. You cannot fault
yeah,
it.
yeah, 100%. If you may be lucky, I think I was really lucky with yours. I picked yours up for $150 secondhand.
And it works perfect. Like you don't need. This is
Yeah.
the biggest thing with PC. You don't always have to buy everything brand new, especially your peripherals. Like, yeah, sure, lash out
Oh
for
no.
like your
Yeah,
CPU and
100%.
GPU, but your peripherals, you can. It's like buying secondhand stuff off marketplace, but people actually reply to you when you're trying to buy something. But
Yeah.
definitely don't go for the top stuff if you're trying to get into it. That's for
Oh,
sure.
100%. And it's so funny because there's so many people, like, they're buying, they use it for a year and they swap it out, or they don't get enough playtime. And you can pick up some top quality stuff for half the price, or two-thirds of the price. So that's where I am currently at with the X56. And at the moment, I think down the track I will push for a wing wing HOTAS, Orion 2 or something like that, with a little bit more. functions on the actual stick, but the actual X56 throttle, I don't know. For me, it just really works mainly because where my thumb is, I've got so much access to my thumb. But you do have the option, once you get really good, like with the Hornet, if anyone heads over to the Wing Wing website, you can literally buy the scratch pad, so the middle pad, um, the screens, the three screens which you can use. You can
Oh,
literally
I've seen
buy
those.
the whole cockpit of the Hornet
That takes
for
milsim to a whole new level. Like that's
yeah,
that's
and
intense stuff. Like I've
some
seen that for the A10. I think it was the same one that BK was sharing with us a while back. And
yeah.
instead of using your mouse, you're physically touching it in front of you, so you could have that. What I don't think you'd be able to have it on a regular desk, but that's some intense stuff. I'd
Well,
love it, but it's
the
you'd want this
trade
game
off
to be your
is,
full time game. That's for sure. If you're spending
oh,
that much.
that's there are some people that really love, say, the A10 or Hornet or F16 Viper, and they really love it. And they fly it all the time. So if you really fall in love with an airframe, oh, go for it. It will cost a bit, but you're literally there. And then once you add VR into the situation, oh, it blows your mind
That
away.
change, yeah, that blew my mind when using your VR for it. It
Yeah,
it sets you, it makes you feel like you're there more than anything. Now, before we go, before we make everyone blow their wallet on exactly what they're spending, that's the HOTAS. So that's the peripherals that you will need, providing
yeah,
that your PC can actually run this. Now,
yeah,
at its core, the game, when you look on the Steam page, it's quite easy. I can throw at the bottom of this video, I'll throw in the link to the Steam page so you can read it all. But the
yeah,
minimum recommendation isn't actually too critical, like needing a 3 gigahertz 4 core, which, geez, I do not know which CPU off the top of my head even runs only 4 cores now. I think they're like 6 standard, but a 3
yeah,
gigahertz is very standard. Like pretty much every single CPU that I can think of right now on the market, or even previously, is higher than 3 gigahertz. That's fine.
yep,
16 gig of RAM is very normal unless you're on an
yep,
extremely budget PC that might have like 8, like if you bought like $1,000 PC or less. But that's
yep,
easy fixable. RAM's cheap. You can pick up an 8 gig stick if it's
yep,
under like $50, depending on what you're exactly buying. But it's also the GPU. So the GPU needs to be 8 gigabytes, which yet again,
it's pretty standard.
old ones, yeah, are like maybe
Yeah, it's
six or
pretty standard.
four. But it doesn't actually say which one, as long as it's the 8 gig. So really, if you're
Yeah,
running something like, which I was previously, a Ryzen 5 3600, that'll run it smoothly. I had 16 gig of RAM when I was first doing it, and
yeah,
I was running a 1080 Ti back then before I upgraded. So that was running it. It was a little bit sketchy, but you could put on lower graphics and still quite
yeah. You can
enjoy
run it.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
And
You can
now
still
I
run it.
run it buttery smooth on the Ryzen 5 5600, so mid-range
Yep,
CPU, definitely not high. A
yep,
3070, which is, look, it's medium high, but with the age of, you're seeing your 7900s come out, your 4080s, 4090s, to me, it's starting to get a lot more to the mid-range sort of size. And then I've got
yeah,
32 gig of RAM. So that's enough to be able to make this really work. Now it's also, you need storage as well. This game takes up a lot of
yeah. You do
storage,
need storage.
like
Yeah,
two to five
for
hundred
sure.
gigabytes worth of storage for this game to effectively work. So
Yeah.
if you can meet all those parameters, I actually almost reckon, unless your PC is extremely old, like I'm talking pre 2010, you shouldn't need to really upgrade too much to be able to get it. And the HOTAS actually might be the most expensive thing that you have to buy to be able to start playing this game, except for the actual frames themselves, which we can get into in a moment. But there's not a lot of
So,
advice you can sort of give there. You just need to be able to pick what's
oh,
actually going to properly
so com-
run.
so I'll compare my current rig to my rig back in 2016. So in 2016, I had the Ryzen 3600, 3600X.
You had the X, you had the model
Yeah,
above
I had
mine,
the
yeah.
X. And then I had also the 5500 XT. I look at the box here. Yeah, the 5500 XT, MSI 5500 XT. So that there alone, that's 8 gigabyte. So you had the 5700, the 5600, and the 55. So it's kind of like the bottom, the lower end of the range back then. And that was eight gigabyte. So that ran it fine. no dramas, but I couldn't really push the limits graphically, and also the viewing range. So you got to remember, some of these maps here are like 1,000 by 1,000 kilometers,
Oh, I
square
feel them.
kilometers.
I feel them going in a freaking flying slow tank. That's for
And
sure.
yeah, especially like with ground pounding in the A10, or if you're using air-to-air fighting or anything like that, visual range, besides radars looking down your radar, visually when you get caught into a dogfight, you want to visually be able to see
What you're
see
actually
them
shooting at.
clearly.
You need to see
Exactly.
your enemy. Yeah.
Because the most important thing about DCS is just constant situational awareness from all the information you receive from the cockpit, plus what's going on around you from the ground, in the air, and all that kind of stuff. So from 2016 to what I have now, and this is running butterly smooth. And so I've built my rig to run VR, and because once you go VR, VR is so taxing on the
You need
system.
high end. You need high end systems and a lot of things to be able,
Yeah,
but not just high end. You need to make sure it matches. So you reduce. You'll have some sort of bottlenecking, but you need to reduce the
yeah.
bottlenecking. So you got to be smart.
So two things if you got a basic system. So just say you're running I think anything with I'm so right now I'm all AMD at the moment. So anything with a 3000 series, Ryzen 3000 series, so from your 3600 all the way to your 3900X, you're beautiful, you're sweet, you're covered. And then with your graphics card, I would say if you can get your hands on a 6000 series, so the 6600 or 6600 XT to your 6900, so anywhere in between there, that's brilliant. But if you go to NVIDIA way, your 2080s, 2070s, 2080s,
Yeah, that 2000 series is
3070s.
what
I
you
think
want to
you
look
run a
at.
3070.
A
Yeah, 3070.
3070 before I eventually switch to
Yeah,
Team Red soon. This is my last Nvidia card.
yeah. But the most important thing is that memory, 16 gigabytes. Even though it does recommend, once you go onto online or you start making missions with up to 1,000. So the missions that we play on our Friday nights and stuff like that, there could be up to 500, 600 plus units on the whole map, units that are all AI controlled. So, RAM then becomes really, really important. So I recommend a minimum of 32. I use 128 gigabytes. And that literally, so during our games, I'm using 40 odd gigabytes while playing.
Oh, it sucks it up. It uses all 30. I think it sits around about 30 out of my 32 gigs. So it
Yeah.
gets it. So, and that's the recommended settings on Steam to be able to do. So I definitely wouldn't look.
So,
If you need to
yeah,
go
you'll
minimum, go minimum. But if you are sort of around that time, you're like, look, I'm thinking of upgrading.
upgrade the RAM.
Definitely have a look. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to jump to the next one, and this is so we've covered what DCS is. We've covered how exactly to get into it, which is your peripherals like your HOTAS, and potentially upgrading your PC. Maybe not, just depending on the age of it. Hopefully, you don't have to do much. Now the
Yeah.
hard part is actually picking the airframe. Now you covered it early in terms of getting into a low fidelity, so we don't really have to recover this. But when you first got me into this, I think it was a good 12 months ago or so.
Yeah.
I started in the A10A and the F15C.
Yeah.
Now the A10A was what I fell in love with the most over the F15. Tried to juggle them both, but I found that the dogfighting was fun, but I sucked at it. And I kept on stalling the plane and somehow just yeah, I don't know how how I did it. I was trying to be Maverick too hard, that's for sure. But then getting into the A10, even though it was slower, I could carry an arsenal on that bloody thing, and it was always fun just being able to mix between because you can take everything. You can take your sidewinders, your Mavericks, you can take your GBU. So I can
Yeah.
fight in the air, I can fight on the ground, I can bomb things to oblivion. Now that was the plane. I thought, no, I'm definitely not going to go to the A10C. And then as soon as I went to the A10C, I went, why did I wait 12 months to upgrade to this? I can do so much more. And I covered this in my mini, what do you even call it, a tutorial?
Oh, a little mini guide. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
my little mini guide on
Yeah.
things where I recommend that, yes, if you can go at low fidelity, just to be able to get into it, because you don't want to spend like $150, hundreds more and more on frames, and you just go, oh, I don't really like this. The
Yeah.
F15C gets you understanding air to air. The A10A gets you understanding the ground. For helicopters, the recommendation is the Huey because it's the least things going on. It's high fidelity still. There are no low fidelity helicopters, but the Huey's like it's meant to be the easiest one to be able to learn. And BK flies that all the time. Trav has just gotten into it. So
Yeah.
that's the hard part is research exactly what do you want to do in the game. Do you want to
Well,
be a transporter? Do you want to be a ground pounder, or do you want to fight in the skies?
yeah, it all comes down to personal inference. Like for me, I have no interest in helicopters. They are literally next level in terms of control, stability, and flying. I've always had a fascination and passion for military jet fighters and stuff like that. So when I first started with the F-15C, I wanted to add air because I'm coming back. So if you go back to 1996, right, my first game that I fell in love with was this game called F-22 Raptor, F-22 Rap Lightning 2
Never heard
by
of that
this
one.
company called
Yeah,
yeah, look it up, look it up. It was all based on the F-22 Raptor, and you were a boss because you could use the stealth capabilities of their take on SAM sites, and it was you had mini thermal nuclear weapons in that game.
back in '96, that would have been the
This is back in
bee's knees.
'96, yeah,
Yeah, that would have been
yeah.
advanced for its time. We went, wow, look at this.
Well, yeah, and at the time also, if you look at, I think at the time you had Falcon 2.0. So Falcon was the milsim of the Viper. So maybe some people might know of that, but you definitely look it up. Then you had Jane's Fighter World and all that kind of stuff. So, but that's where it started for me, air-to-air combat. And the F-15C, when I got into DCS, that's the first one I started off with, and it literally set the groundwork of using the radar, understanding the missiles, understanding and this is for everyone, understanding energy. The harder you turn, the more energy you lose, the slower you get. Therefore, you need to gain that back. So maintaining your energy in dogfighting or giving the correct parameters to get the maximum AMRAAM missile launch, just stuff like that. And the same goes with the A10A. The setting the plane up for your direct attacks, understanding the difference between CCIP bombing versus CCRP
Then the
auto bombing.
laser GPS guided everything, which is, we funny enough have found out that I've been using weapons so incorrectly. It's almost painful for everyone.
It might be for me. It's an absolute fascination because, like, so if you take these aircraft are using GPS guided systems back in the 70s. And when did we first get GPS in cars?
Oh,
you know,
in phones and everything, yeah, we're talking
yeah,
decades and
it's
decades
it's
later.
so
So
it's so fascinating.
to know
So
that
that's
this
where,
technology's it's
yeah,
out now.
yeah, exactly, and that's where I started off for a few years, and then my first full fidelity model in DCS was the Harrier, and then I went from the Harrier Viper Hornet,
You
and
must
that's
love it now, F-18.
yeah, the F-18, like the F-18 and F-16 are really really similar. In terms of their characteristics, the F-16 is lighter and faster, so you can get up to speed a lot quicker. So you can gain your energy back up a lot quicker. But what that sacrifices, because it's a single-engined aircraft, is that can't carry and you don't carry heaps of fuel, so you got to carry extra tanks, and it's limited in how much weapons and loading it can carry versus the F-18. So depends on the mood and stuff like that. But what we do, because the F-18 can carry more munitions on standby, so it can carry more AMRAAMs or HARM missiles to give you guys cover or taking on SAM sites and stuff like that. So yeah, the F-18. So you find the plane. I definitely find people to start off with a low fidelity, and there's not just the F-15C or the A-10A. You got the MiG-29,
If you're going
and
on the
then
Ruskies, yeah, the MiG-29s
yeah,
for the
the
Ruskies.
MiG-29. That's a really cool aircraft. And then you got the Su-27 and the Su-33. I'm pretty sure. Oh, and also the Russian equivalent of the A-10, the Su-25.
Su-25, yeah, which
Yeah, that's
I've
a pretty cool
been
plane
looking at
to check
potentially
out. Yeah,
dabbling into, but that pretty much brings it down to have a look of what do you want to go? Do you want to start off on NATO? Do you want to start off on the Ruskies? What having a good understanding of even research the plane, like understand what they
yeah,
can do, what they can carry.
yeah,
Look on the Steam the store page, get a
Yep.
bit of information, look at reviews, even look at all your tutorials, and you're going to really find out what's right for you. Now, you might pick that aircraft and decide, no, this is not for me, and change to something else. It'll guarantee it'll happen. Or you'll find something else and go, no, that's my mold.
Yep.
I won't take away from the A10. See, like it's just at least not from the NATO sort of forces. Like
No,
that's the
it's a bit
puppet
of
that
a
I love. And you
like
get into your ways because there
it's
is
a
still hundreds of things I do not know about the A10C. Some of it I'm just go, yeah, should I
uh,
know? Should I not know?
it
Do I
takes
want
time.
to? Yeah, but like
The
you
learning curve
understand
is
so
steep.
much. It
The
is,
learning
but
curve is steep.
it's so good when you actually discover how to do stuff and you go, wow, that is
Yeah.
going to make life so much better. And yeah, that's what we're going to do. Now, before we wrap it up, is there anything that you want to be able to close off with there, Schmags?
Um. Yeah. This game can be very, very daunting. And the learning curve can be very, very high. So don't be afraid to look up resources. And it's amazing with YouTube. The resources for this game is abundant. Every single airframe, every single HOTAS setup, um, it's on YouTube. It's insane. So once you start looking, read through, watch videos and the tutorials, but also, if you got friends that are, always shout out, because having someone there to help guide you in real time and take you through processes helps a lot too. But yeah, just get into it, take it easy, and just enjoy. Some people that play this and they just enjoy just flying low through the valleys for the canyons, or flying high. They don't even jump online or anything like that. So no, I think it's a brilliant game. It's my favorite game for sure.
It's definitely become a guilty pleasure, that's for sure. When I get away
It
from
is,
like
yeah.
squads and you hell let loose, when you step away from the community for that. But awesome, that's episode one done, guys. For getting into what DCS is, how to get into it, and how to pick your airframe you go for. We've got so much more in huge amount of detail that we can get into this game. So if you're wanting to know the ins and outs of the game from people that are playing it and trying to clock up thousands of hours, make sure you hang around. If you ever want to be able to get a game with us, just jump into the BigD Discord. We have the DCS section there. Ask any questions. We post all of our videos, and we usually play at least once or twice a week. So hit us up through that spot. But until the next podcast, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you in the next one.